Hello and welcome to the Michael Mama Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of western North Carolina. And I think we have two experiments going on concurrently that we'll talk about today. One of them is we're going to start recording in a way where we can walk around Mount Soma, which is why we're here at the Sri Someshwara Temple visiting. And hopefully we'll be able to get that recorded. And the other thing is just that really all of Mount Soma is a great experiment, if you want to call it an experiment. You see, a lot of people look at a temple and they kind of view it as a sort of a religious thing. And you could do that, but really, more strictly speaking, it's physics. All of this is about physics, the way it's structured, the mathematics of the structure, every aspect about this thing is every bit and even more about physics as that cell phone that this is being recorded on. Now, the thing is, the classic or the traditional these days language of physics is mathematics. And that's great. That was my major in undergrad. I love math and physics. But the thing is, it's an awkward language. And so the real distinction between Sanskrit, the real distinction between physics today and the physics of ancient times that was a much more efficient technology was the language that was used. The language was Sanskrit, and it was all in terms of what in modern physics they would call operators, they called devas, different personified correlates to different structures within the unified field, the technology of the quantum mechanical realm, in a much more efficient way. It's just like if I'm talking to you, if I was talking to Kyle, I don't think I'm talking to a bunch of math equations, I'm talking to a person. So it's the personified correlate to that mathematics. Even though the mathematics is valid, it becomes a more accessible language. So let's go into the temple and we'll do a brief tour here. Hi there. Okay, and so, well, this is Pandit Prasad. A pundit, people don't really even understand what a pundit really is. A pundit is an individual, first of all, that has pundit. There are like 1,000 pundits in the whole world. And very few people would even qualify to be trained as a pundit because they have to have a physiology that's been cultured over generations, thousands of years. So Pandit Prasad is family. It's been a lineage that refines the DNA, refines the physiology so that the technology can be employed effectively. Okay? So everything about this temple, the whole structure, it's all mathematically precise. And again, it's though the mathematics is there, what modern physics has no idea about is that the modality that we use to interface with with that level of existence isn't about arithmetic and mathematics. That's too crude. It's about the personified correlates to different operators within the unified field. And those different operators we call the devas. And so if we step over here, this is Lord Ganesh, a deva. And see, you know, on one level, people might look at Lord Ganesh and say, oh, that's pretty weird. You know, some guy with an elephant head, that's too strange. But the thing is, all of those values, everything in nature emerges out of the unified field. And so those different qualities, be it the shape of an elephant or anything, a horse, you name it, a monkey, you name it, those are all operators within the structure of the unified field, and they all bring out different values of the unified field. And depending on which operator you're dealing with, they enliven, or you could say embody, represent some aspects of the unified field, some facets of that diamond in a more effective way. So Lord Karnesh is he's the Lord of removal of obstacles, Lord of categories. What we're talking about there is structure within the unified field. These aren't just religious ideas, they're physics. And the interface with that physics is personified. It's not numbers and mathematics, it's too crude. Yeah, you can build an atomic bomb and blow things up, but if you want to have a more refined and mature relationship with it all, then we interface through this language. This is Skanda, Kartikeya. The language is Sanskrit. He represents other values. You can see he has, from the Western perspective, you might look at that and say, well, that's pretty weird, some guy with two wives or whatever. But it correlates to another value, and that value is like, if you look at the representation of in medicine of the, you have the symbol, what's it called? And so that has the thing with the two serpents going on either side. That's a value, it's a physics. And that's called the Ida, the Pingala, and the Sushumna. And that's a value that wells up in all different aspects of life. And that representation in medicine is just one. The Ida Pingala and Sushumna are the primary energy currents that are foundational to the physiology. But of course, it's so much more than just that. And Kartikeya is the personified embodiment of that value. Okay? And then we come over here, this is Mother Divine. And we have two aspects of Mother Divine. That's a little more in depth, but everything is structured in a mandala. So Mother Divine isn't one person and that's it. You go around the mandala, no difference, no difference, no difference, but it's a subtle difference, subtle difference, subtle difference that leads to profound differences, like the difference between Lakshmi and Kali, for example. And this is then the female aspect of divinity. The female aspect of divinity is the value that gives birth to relative existence, to what we in the West generally consider the only reality there is. That's funny, huh? Yeah, okay. So we'll go outside now so that they can, because they're going to be doing some ceremonies in that. Oh, we left out, this is a Shiva temple. And this, gosh, it's also, we're just touching the surface here. But Lord Shiva is the personified correlate, and actually, is it the personified correlate, or is Lord Shiva the absolute itself, the transcendent, the unified field of physics, the one thing that's the source of all relativity? That's better said, because the personified aspects are intimately connected with, but if we lose ourselves to just a personified value, it's like getting caught up in a kite without realizing it has a tail that gives it stability and strength, and that's where its real power lies. So Lord Shiva really is the absolute itself, the pure transcendent, the unbounded source of all existence. And we can look at different mathematical aspects of this to give us a deeper insight into the nature. And those insights are important to really understand more and more fully, and you can never totally understand it. It's too huge. It's like saying, I totally understand physics. You'll never totally understand physics. And this is even deeper. It's the underlying basis of physics and all aspects of life, psychology, you name it. It's the source of all existence. And so what Pandit Prasad does, he's been thoroughly trained in the technologies of how to interface with these different values and enliven the unifying, harmonizing quality of those values to well up through relative existence and bring life to fulfillment, all aspects of life. And it's a technology, a very precise technology. And the foundational language is Sanskrit. Why? Is Sanskrit something that some guy made up? No. Sanskrit is the sounds of oneness, the unified field, interacting within itself. The self-interacting dynamic of pure isness, which is pure consciousness. Modern physicists now, many of them are even saying the more they study the unified field, the more they realize it's just consciousness. Like Swami Muktananda said, this is all just a play of consciousness. The one thing that's the source of everything. Yeah, we're going there now, Panaji. Thank you. So here now is the Navagraha. Superficial interpretation, Graha, planet. Means so much more than that. Navagraha, the 9 planets. But what this really is, when you look at the self-interacting dynamic of pure consciousness, it's like geometric. You could look at it that way, or it has a geometric structure. And kind of like with a kaleidoscope, if you've ever looked at a kaleidoscope, you can look at it one way and say, well, it's the play of 2 different colors, perhaps. And so it's all a dance of 2. You look at it another way and you say, well, within that kaleidoscope, we can identify 9 different branches to the snowflake-like crystalline structure that you see in the kaleidoscope. So really, it's all the dance of 9. And there were many different structures inherent within the unified field. But the thing is, some of them are more accessible, more usable, more technologically relevant, especially when you employ the technology of the unified field uh, uh, and through the language of Sanskrit, which is, again, primarily personified values, still mathematically precise, but personified. And so the interesting thing is that the 9 planets map onto the planets in our solar system. Everything maps onto everything else. Why? Because everything comes from the same one thing. If you come from the absolute and I come from the absolute, then if you can see how I am in my essence the absolute and you are in your essence the absolute, then you and I are one. Just math, you could say. And like that, there's different structures that are mathematically precise and accessible. That's the beauty of Jyotish, which is the study of the structure, the light of life. And the 9 planets in our solar system, the interesting thing about that is there's a degree of traceability, far more elusive than most astrologers might claim, but nevertheless it is there. There's a correlation between a person's life, how it maps onto the 9 planets, and how then the more adept you are at understanding that correlation, that mapping, the more accessible that information can be. And also there's technologies that can be used to, let's say there's one aspect of life that is lacking in a person's life. By performing the technology that is relevant to that aspect, that one graha, you can enliven that value and it brings that quality to life. It's a physics, but it's an interface with physics that includes the personified quality, because the personified quality is that which gives it meaning, which gives it depth, which makes it more pragmatically accessible. The language we're using in the West these days, it has validity, but it's far too awkward. Just to do the mathematics of an electron when it moves from this point to this point fills up chalkboards, and it essentially becomes meaningless. So what's needed is a technology that's more universal, more applicable, more relevant to life, more accessible. And that's what this is all about. Now, there's a technology that we can use Just like we can use technology to interface with this graha or that graha, this value or that value, there's a technology that we can use. It was cognized by Rishi Muni Mayan, who was Vishwakarma. He was like with Vishwakarma, which is a cosmic architect. What does that mean? The one who studies the very structure of that whole thing, the whole manifest creation and the structure of the universe, you see? And so it's an incredibly deep and profound science. And it is a science. And in those cognitions by Muni Mayan, there's a method to build a unified field generator, which is what this temple is something that generates a coherence and intelligence, a value inherent within the nature of the unified field that brings harmony to life. But there's a technology offered to us by Muni Mayan, how to build one that is so powerful, so huge, so transformative, that one of those structures is sufficient to transform an entire continent into living a life in harmony with nature, in harmony with our own true nature, our own divinity, what people would say in harmony with God. And it's physics, it's a science, it's how to do it. And the people that run it, who runs something like that? It's the pundits. Why? Because they have the knowledge, they have the training, they have the physiologies. And so what Mount Soma is all about is building that. It's called an enlightened city. And that's what we're building here. This is step one, really. But nevertheless, you see, it's all contained within the seed. The knowledge of the entire plant, the entire enlightened city, is there in the seed. And so we've planted the seed, and it's growing, and it will emerge into a full enlightened city, which will be transformative. I learned about that back in 1981. And when I first heard about it, I said, well, let's build it. Never left me. To this day, it's been my life. And even finding those cognitions, they're on palm leaves that were scrolled into, thousands of years ago. And it took over 20 years just to find the guy who has the palm leaves, who happens to be the guy who built this temple, the Vedic architect. And so we have those plans, and we're going to build it. Okay, well, we'll have fun with this. We'll film different parts of Mount Soma. And this was step one. That's why I call it an experiment. I hope it worked out pretty well. We'll see. And it also maps onto, everything maps, and it's the Mount Soma, the experiment that Mount Soma is, which is the implementation of that technology, that transformative technology that can get rid of all the suffering, all the wars, all the conflict, all the stupidity, all the ridiculousness in the world that's completely unnecessary. It's just technology. That's all that's lacking. Okay, thanks for listening, and we'll talk again next week.